So the first thing first is we're going to. Can you hear me from there? Okay. So we're going to create. Okay. First of all, we can actually in our HTML, in our index or HTML like this, we can actually open a script element and write our JavaScript inside this script element. Okay. So we can do it like this. And we can also have our normal HTML, okay, and somewhere within the body, we can open the script element and write our JavaScript here, okay. That means all other parts of our HTML will be existing with the JavaScript in it, okay. So now I'm going to just go to the index. I've not saved this former work that was there, so refresh this and we'll have an empty page. Okay. Now we're also going to be working with our inspector as well as our console. Okay. Yes, our inspector and our console. Now, from our inspector so far, you find out that what we have is just the body and the script in it, and actually the script there's nothing in it. Okay. So now the first thing first we did. Okay, we talked about a lot of things, but let's just start from where we started document.write. Then we go to our variables and functions. Okay, so now document.write, we've said so far that if you want to print anything on our document, you say document.write or document.write line. As you can see there, that our VS Code is suggesting for us. Okay, so now I'll simply put the text that I want to put or that I want to write. Okay, so I simply say, let's say hello world. Okay, so now when I say hello world, if I come here, refresh my page, you simply say, see the hello world printed. Okay, hello world is printed now, and you can see from your inspector, you see hello world. This is script on top here. Printed the hello world, and the hello world is actually printed on the page. As you can see, if I hover my mouse on it, it's going to just tell you the hello world there. So we can print using the document. Then I also said that we can, like I said, I'll be commenting them. Okay, but better still, let's work with external JavaScript. Okay, now we can also, instead of doing it here in this document, we can also link it up here, okay, or link it down here. The difference is just that we put a script that have a source, just like image source, that will direct it to make reference to an external script. That means I can create an external script. Let's say inside this my JS folder, I can call this, let's say scripts, okay, .js. Okay, because it's going to have JS extension. Okay, so now this thing I did here, I can simply move it. Okay, I can simply move it, then remove this script here. So as long as this guy is connected JS slash script.js, that means I make reference to this guy. From JS folder, you get to script.js. Okay, so I'll simply come here and write my JavaScript here, and everything will still be intact. Okay, so you can see here I'm now making reference to this script.js and it's still printing my hello for me. Okay, so everything seems the same. Okay, so now uh, if I'm to do the other context, which is window, I simply say window dot what? Alert. Okay, so if I say windows dot alert, I can say hello world. Okay, now if I refresh my page, it will give me a hello world on an alert box like Okay. Now it's no longer in the context of the document. It's now in the context of the browser window. Okay. So click OK to now load the page. So this is another context. Watch. I'm omitting the semicolon. Like I told you, it will still work, but it's advisable you you stick to the convention of adding a semicolon in case you want to go into TypeScript. Okay. So, or any other, familiarize yourself with normal programming uh, 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 procedures. Okay, so that is it. Then also, I told you that you can also use the console. Okay, console dot log. Okay, console dot log. You can simply say hello world. Okay, so if we say hello world, now we'll print here, nothing will print on our page, neither you can see anything from your inspector here. But if you come to the console environment, you're going to see what you just printed. Okay? So this is how you print on your console. You can either do console.log, like what we have on our board. We have console.error or console.one. Okay, anyone you see, you're going to see from your uh, what's it called, from your console environment, you're going to see the warning, the error. Okay, I think because of the error, the warning didn't come out. Okay, so let's take the warning above. Okay, okay, let's say, let's remove the error and leave the warning. For some reasons, console.one. Okay, sorry. I was the one that turned off my warning. Okay, you can see from my console environment here. You can either say error, warning, log, info, debug, anyone you want. You can just on it off and you see it. So I turned off my warning. That's why it was not showing. Okay, so you can see all of them will show. Okay, so you see the warning, you see the error, you see the log. Okay, so depending on which one you are displaying. Okay, so that is for that. Okay, now I'll just leave the comments here. You know that, okay, these are according to how we've studied them so far. Now the next thing we're going to do is talking about making reference. Okay, I did some example with a H1 from our board. Let's say we have a H1 here. Okay, now if we come down here and we say we want to make reference to the H1, I said something like document dot get element by tag name, right? Tag name. Then you now specify the tag name. Okay, I think let's say H1 here. Okay, so now for us to see what this tag name actually is, okay, you can just decide to log it, or more preferable, we put we assign it to a variable. Okay, so let's just leave it aside first and talk about the variables. Okay, now we also saw that we can declare a variable using using the var keyword, or we can declare a variable using the let keyword. Okay, now both these a and b are variables. Okay, so now that the let and the var are used as keywords for declaring variables, you can actually use the variables. Like I said, it does not you don't really need to specify the data type. If I put 5, it will accept 5. Like if I log the variable console.log, let's say log A, automatically it's going to print A, it's going to print 5 for you as the value of your A. Okay, so for instance, if we say B is equal to 7.56, for instance, and we say A plus B. Okay, so if we refresh our page, it's going to give us 12.6, which is 5 plus 7.6. Okay, so these are just your basic programming procedures. Okay, now if we want to come back to this now, let me leave this. Yes, okay, okay, okay. Let's just make it a comment. Variable declarations. Okay, I can also make normal comments here and say variable declarations. Okay, you can use the let and bar. You can also have a constant declaration. Constant declaration. Okay, where we use the keyword const. Okay, we also talked about it. So I can say const. Let's say uh, name is equal to destiny. Okay. Okay. So the same thing with the variable. The only difference is that when you make name constant, if I come here and say name is Jude. Okay. Look at uh, constant name any. Okay. It's not giving me an error here now, but when I refresh my page here, it's going to give me on caught type error, invalid assignment to constant name. Okay, so that is the power of your console. Your console can actually give you an error that you have on your page. Okay, but if I say names, for instance, like this, and I do this, I don't have an error. Okay, that means it's still possible if I come here, log, sorry, if I say log names, okay, now refresh this, I simply get this. So what are you learning from here? Simply tell you that even without using the var alert keyword, just calling it names like this, the browser automatically understands that you are trying to deal with variables. That's what I told you about the flexibility of most of these modern languages. Okay, but it's advisable you stick to the practice of declaring a variable name. Okay, though nothing will happen if you declare it still the same thing. Okay, so be conscious of that. Okay, so let's come back to this. Now we can actually declare a variable and assign it. Let's use the let keyword and we'll say element. Let's call it element. Okay, is equal to this. Okay, so now when we say element is equal to this, now let's see what the elements have. We can simply log it. When we log the element, it will give us the elements. Okay, what the element is actually is. So if I refresh my page here, you're going to see that the element is a HTML collection called H1. Okay, it's a HTML collection. How does it know that it's a HTML collection? This is the handwork of the DOM, like I told you about. Okay, now I'm simply making reference to this H1. If you watch what's happening here now, you see that when I hover my mouse on the H1, it's indicating here that there's an H1 on your page. Okay, now let's assume we have something inside the H1. Hello. Okay, let's just assume we have something here. I refresh this. Okay, these are H1. So if I hover my mouse on it, you find out that it's actually getting that particular guy. So you see, we can actually target by the tagging. But the problem we have here now is H1 have length 1. Okay, length 1. You know when I say length, just like an array have the size. The length here is representing the size. And I told you that when you use tag name or use class name, it simply represents multiple things because there's every tendency that you have multiple H1 in your, in your document. Okay? How do you know the one you're talking about? You have to make reference to them using the index, just like an array, starting from 0. You can see that you have an index of 0 here. So when I open this, it's going to give you all these things you see are simply according to the document object model. These are the things, the properties of this H1. Yes. So these are everything about the H1. Okay, now among all the properties now, you're going to see the inner text, the inner HTML I talked about earlier. You're going to see both all the properties that you can find. Okay, like you can see, the inner text is hello, the inner HTML is hello. So for instance, assuming I want to, like what we're doing, okay, let's say we want to, there's nothing in it, I want to print into it. First thing first, when you use tag name, you know that it's going to bring many tags, okay? So if you want to specify the one, if you know the index of the one you're looking for, you simply, like for instance, when I mean multiple, this that means if I have different H1, of course, you're going to see that here I'm going to have them in an array, HTML collection of 0, 1, 2 to 7, that to 6. That means we have the total length of 7 H1. You understand? Just like an array, start from 0 to 6. Okay, so anyone you want to print into, you simply specify the one simply by having the index of it. Okay, I can simply say index, just like an array. 0, that means I mean the first one. If I do that, I mean the second one. If I put 3, that means I mean the fourth one. You understand? Uh-huh. So if I say element, that's I'm talking about the fourth element here now. Okay, this element here now is simply telling the fourth page one. So if I say dot inner text is equal to, okay, hello world. Okay, now let me remove it from the console. Okay, we want to see it on the browser. Okay, now remember I specifying the fourth element, the fourth H1. Okay, so now look at what we have here. Okay, we have hello world. Now go to our inspector. You see that he left the first one, left second one, left, came to the fourth one. Okay, so that is just it. So you should know that when you are using the tag name, you are making reference to a lot of elements. Same thing applies to when you are using a class name too. That means if we, let me comment this first, then let me duplicate this, then show you other. Okay, you can see we have get element. Well, if say get element, can get element by its ID, can get element by class name, that's by class. You can get element by name, that means you give the element a name attribute. You can get element by tag name, which is what we've done at the top already. Then we can get element by tag name ns. Okay, this ns, I'm not really sure what the ns is, but it's kind of an alternative to the tag name. Okay, so you can see different ways we can get elements, including ID. Okay, So now let's go back to let's get by ID. Okay. Now let's remove all the H1 and give this one that will have an ID. Okay. I will give this an ID. Let's just call it HD as the ID. So what we'll now go to do here is we'll call it HD. Okay. Then we'll now set uh, the inner HTML to it. Okay. So I might not even declare this. Okay. I can just simply say document dot get element by ID. Then I say HD. Okay. Dot inner inner test. Okay. Is equal to, and I say hello world. Okay. So this automatically will also print hello world inside my okay. Now let's try something else. You can see how it is here from your inspector. Your JavaScript is simply injecting the text into it. Now let's try something else. Let's assume that this guy is not a H1. Okay. Let's say it's a div. Okay. Let's say this guy is what a div. Hold on, please. Okay. So let's say it's a div. So if we refresh, since we didn't change the ID, so we are still making reference to it in the JavaScript. So if we refresh, it will work like a normal div. Look at a div. Okay. So we are still injecting the hello world into the div. Now let's assume that what we want to put inside it have some HTML in it. Okay. So we say H1 for instance. Okay. We say hello world and close the H1. Okay. So now we have our H1 and this, and we're using inner text. Now see how it's going to appear. Okay, because you said you should print the text inside it should be this guy. So if you want to render this thing, if you don't want the browser to see it as a text, you want the browser to see it as HTML that it is, you don't need to use inner text in that case. Okay, let me comment this so that you understand. Okay, so you have to say inner HTML instead of inner text. So if you say inner HTML, it's going to render it as H1. So inside the div now, if you open it up, you see that it's H1 that is inside it, and the H1 is rendered the way it's supposed to be rendered by the browser. Okay, you see the difference now. It just the difference is just inner text, inner HTML, inner HTML, inner text. Another thing again, please remember JavaScript is what case sensitive. Okay, so when you are writing your JavaScript, you should take cognizance of all the cases that you are using. Okay, so that is just it. Now, also, I also made reference on the board. I made reference to uh, I made reference to input values. Okay. Now, assuming we have an input here, okay, if I just have an input like this, automatically we have this. Okay, we have this. Okay. Now, what I told you when I was describing the input, I told you that everything you are entering here is the value of the input. Okay, but why it's not explicitly declared here as the attribute It's because by default, the browser understands that the input have a value, and the value most times is required by the user, required by the browser from the user. You understand? You see why it's not normally uh, 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 declared while you are putting it. But in the case where you want to predefine the value, okay, you have to explicitly declare it inside this. So if I say value here, you can see it's part of the input attribute. I can simply say, let's say destiny, for instance. Okay, so when you refresh this page, automatically the value inside is destiny. Okay, but since you want the user to enter a value, you don't need to specify value, except let's say you want to make this readable or read only rather, or disabled. Okay, if I make it read only now, okay, it's a property of the input. I cannot edit it. If you need it to be read only or you want it to be disabled, okay, so it depend on the scenario or the kind of application or what you want to do. Okay. Now there is something about these two properties of input. Now when you make it disabled, most times when you make an element disabled, the value might not be accessible in some cases, though depending on how you are doing your workflow from the from behind from your code. Okay, like if you're using maybe the old conventional way of using PHP to submit code. Okay, now in a disabled input, the value will not be submitted with the code. But in a read only input, the value will be submitted. Read only simply you can read it and the value is still active, but you cannot edit the value. But disabled is just like that input is disabled on the form. It's not active. So there's every tendency that the value in it might not be accessible. You understand? You can see how it looks disabled. You see it there. But when I made it read only, you find out that the read only it will look as if it's active. Okay? But the difference is that you cannot edit it. Okay, so in such case that is where you put values in input. But apart from these scenarios, a user is expected to put the value. So that is why the value is not actually specified when you are giving your inputs. Okay, now coming back to JavaScript. now now that we know that the value is what holds the data, okay, now if I give this guy an ID, for instance, okay, gives an ID, let's call it IMP, okay, short for input, okay. So I want to add a value from my JavaScript. Let's say print the hello world in it from here. So what I'll simply do, let me commit this, okay. So I'll simply say documents, okay, documents dot get element by ID. What's the ID? IMP. Okay. Now instead of saying dot inner HTML or dot inner text, I'll simply say dot value. Okay. Dot value is equal to hello. Okay. So if I refresh my page here, automatically it gives us, okay. So that is that. Okay. So from this is just like a walkthrough of everything we've done on the board, except for uh, functions. I think everything we've discussed today is a walkthrough of the whole book, except for functions. Okay, so now let's look at functions a little bit. Okay, now I'll save this. Okay, uh, let me comment this. Comment this. But another thing again is uh, okay. Let me just leave this. If I'm leaving this, I should leave this and leave this. Okay, so that it corresponds with what we have here. Okay, so we can go down and do other things. Now, functions. I told you that we can declare a function using the ex5 syntax simply by saying function. Okay, then the name of the function. Now let's do like when we're doing object-oriented programming. We normally use the greet method. Let's say we want to create the greet method to greet the user. Okay, now if we let's say create a method called greet. Okay, okay. Now on the greet user, we can simply say um, uh, window dot alert. Okay, hello or good evening to you. Okay, so this is our method greet. Okay, now if you know a method is invocable, that is you have to call it. You understand? So if you don't call it, it will just be there. That means if I refresh my page, nothing will happen because there's nowhere I called the method. Okay, so I can simply call the method simply by calling the name what greet. Okay, so when I call the name greet, it will answer me by printing the message. Okay, good. Now, like I said, this is the EX5. We're going to do more things. Okay, that is ECMA scripts version 5. Okay, so this is how it is done. Okay, now doing same thing using ECMA 6, ECMA script version 6. Sorry. Okay, now doing same thing using ECMA script version 6. Okay, like I told you guys, let's comment this. So now using the EX6, okay, and above, said we have other versions apart from EX6. I told you the major breakthrough or the major change happened from EX6. Okay, now I told you that if you want to do something like this, what you simply do is you declare it as a variable. Let's greet, okay, is equal to, then here we now have the arrow function. Okay, exactly the same way I called the EX5, that's how I'll call the EX6. Okay, to tell you that it's the same thing. Okay, invoking the method, the greet method. Okay, so I'll just call it greet and it will print exactly the same thing for me. So whether you're using EX5 or using EX6, it's going to work accordingly. Except if your browser is old, now EX6 and above might be a problem. Okay? It's not the issue of compatibility because it is the browser that reads this syntax. It is the browser that reads and interprets everything that is going on. So if your browser is old, it might not really be used to some of the syntax of EX6 or the later. Okay? So that is just it. So it depends on how old the browser is though. Okay. Now this is a difference between the method, just like what we saw on the board. So basically, this is everything we've discussed on the board. This is everything we've discussed on the board. So, okay. So the next thing we're going to do now is to put to practice these things we glance and use them to do something more meaningful. Okay, so that's it.